So for the past 30 years, my job has been to look at statistics and do research for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. And so I'm going to go through a few of those statistics today. Mostly when I do these presentations, or typically when I do these presentations, I kind of dial down the sociologist in me to kind of soften stuff up a bit. But today I've decided to go straight out sociology. And so, here goes. The studies that we know about the studies that we know about trying to actually judge the number of people go to church on Sunday have consistently demonstrated that it's only about 20% of the population, and that number has been slowly declining over the last 50 years. It picked up in its decline rate in 2000, and has had significant impact on churches across the United States. On top of the fact that it's only about 20% of the population that attends church on Sunday, the vast majority of that are either Roman Catholics or conservative evangelicals. So when you look at mainline groups, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5% of the population, and that's on a very good Sunday. That's Easter. So the question becomes, in a way, is there a religious idea that mainline religious groups have a hold on, an idea, a concept, a way of thinking about who God is and what God's up to that will actually engage people or motivate Americans? Or in the past, has the religious idea that mainline religious groups have had a hold of been tied up with other kinds of things, other sociological kind of phenomena? Has it been tied up with race and ethnicity? A lot of sociologists argue that among Lutherans, that's particularly been the case. That when people got together on Sunday mornings, they weren't just celebrating what it means to be a Lutheran or representing what it means to be a Lutheran, but they were representing a particular ethnic and racial heritage, and that they continued to do that today. The problem is that racial and ethnic heritage was valued considerably less by their children than by the parents and people who grew the institutional aspects of the Lutheran Church. There are other political ideas that motivate Americans. They have to do with freedom and democracy, but one of the most important is individualism. And the conservative evangelical churches, which express that individualism in a much more distinctive way than mainline churches, have a very distinctive advantage over mainline churches. When it comes to social class, Lutherans have increasingly represented the well-to-do in American society, or the upwardly mobile in American society. And religion in American society has become an occupation or has been the purview of poorer folks. So Lutherans, finally, are also suffering from a basic demographic set of factors. Rising mobility means a declining birth rate. And a declining birth rate means there are fewer children. And fewer children means smaller churches. And on top of that, as I often say, Lutherans taught children to think for themselves, and they did. Having said this, it's important to realize that I think Lutherans are really good at one thing, and that's persisting. They maintain their congregations, and they've worked hard to maintain those congregations over time, and they're not about to go down without a battle. They have, on a few occasions, innovated the occasional mega congregation, but by and large, that doesn't fit them. They're comfortable with small congregations. Those small congregations represent their values. Those small congregations are controllable, and those small congregations are maintainable. And when you add up these factors, Lutherans are fighting a losing battle, but they're fighting a battle that they can fight. So I have some slides behind me. This is the number of congregations in the ELCA from 88 to 2016, down from 11,120 congregations to 9,360 congregations. Worship attendance, however, has fallen from about 1.6 million in 1988 to under a million to 941,000 in 2016. So what I want you to see here is that worship attendance is down by 42%, but the number of congregations is down by 15%. You'll see the implications of that in a few seconds. If we had the same, if I try to do a calculation that shows, given the number of worship attendees, how many congregations we need now compared to the number of congregations we needed in 1988, the number would be somewhere around 6,500 congregations compared to the 9,300 that we actually have. We probably have as many as nearly 3,000 too many congregations in the ELCA based on their potential capacity. It's probably hard to see this graph, but this shows the change of worship attendance from 2000 to 2016. And in Minnesota alone, worship attendance has declined by nearly 400,000 since 2000. Followed closely by 250,000 almost in Pennsylvania, over 200,000 in Wisconsin, nearly 150,000 in Ohio, well over 100,000 in Illinois and Iowa, and over 100,000 in California. Essentially, the ELCA is losing about 70,000 a year, which is the size of one of our typical synods. So what this graph shows is the rate of giving compared to attendance change. And what I want you to see here on this graph is that there are times, look at between 1995 and 2000, that as attendance goes down, the rate of attendance goes down from year to year, giving goes up. And you'll see that phenomena happen again between 2001 and 2007, and then again between 2011 and 2012, and between 2014 and 2015. The point of this graphic is worship attendance goes down, there are fewer people, and what do the people who are there do? They give more. Because they're fighting to do what? To survive. The graph also shows that both of these lines, however, are headed where? Down. And so while I say Lutherans fight a good battle, it's a losing battle over time to be able to maintain the number of congregations we have with the number of people we have coming and worship on Sundays. The implications of that are in this graphic, which shows the change in the number of congregations with 50 or fewer, going from about 2,000 congregations in 1990 to 3,700 congregations in 2016. Now, about 1,300 of those congregations, over 1,300 of those congregations are now paired with other congregations, because that's one of our main strategies for survival, is to link congregations together so that they can pool their resources to be able to maintain themselves as congregations. The research that we've done shows what happens when these congregations get smaller is that there's increasing pressure on the income of the congregations. They have fewer people trying to support the same budget that they had the year before. And so the things that go quickly are all of the things that support the larger institutions. Contributions to the Synod and the church-wide organizations, contributions that go to agencies and institutions, contributions that come to seminaries. And the things what goes after that is the salary of the pastor and the compensation levels of pastors. So the congregations are to survive more than, I'm trying to find the right language here. Their choices are, first, keep the congregation open. Second, decrease the involvement in supporting the major institutions, and if push comes to shove, decrease the amount of money that they're using to support and pay for a pastor. This next chart, which I know you're not going to be able to see, but you can get the idea of the trends. This is for all of several selected denominations in the United States. So the big bump there is the Assembly of God. And what you'll see is that the Assembly of God, Pentecostal churches, because they appeal to primarily a lower class constituency, jumped up dramatically from the 70s all the way to the 2000s. But what I want you to see with this graph is after 2000, all of them start to decline. So it's not just Lutherans and Methodists and Presbyterians, though we perfected declining. We have the most strategies to manage decline, but the Pentecostals as well. They're still above zero, but they're headed for zero. They popped up a little over 2000 to 2015, and mostly that is Roman Catholic, it's Latino immigration. About a quarter of the Latino immigration is Pentecostal, and that has fed whatever their ability to maintain those figures. And what you see is, which is giving them a heart attack, the figures for the Southern Baptist Convention, headed towards zero. You've almost made it through the afternoon slides. We asked congregations a few years ago to assess their future. And what this slide tries to do is to show what congregations said about their future, mostly pastors as informants. So as you look from what is it, right to left, I'm directionally challenged. You got it. They're more likely to say we're struggling and that's likely to continue for the foreseeable future, or they're not sure the congregation will survive much longer, or we're doing very okay now but the future is very uncertain. So it's well over half of ELCA congregations that would fall into those categories. Now finally, there are two primary scenarios that I encounter on a regular basis about what needs to be different. And the main scenario is the one promoted by, I call it the Pew scenario, the millennial scenario, which says that what we have to do is to figure out a way to reach out to millennials and engage millennials in our congregations. And if you look through that research, what you see are a series of critiques of religion that millennials make as reasons for why they aren't participating in organized religious churches. The scenario is fairly consistent. The critiques are, religions are partly true, but none are completely true. Religious organizations are too focused on rules, not spirituality. Religious leaders want money and power. Religious people are anti-science, and religious people are hypocritical, judgmental, and insincere. There is no evidence that if a church effectively dealt with each of those critiques, that millennials would be more likely to show up. I do take some solace in the fact that I actually believe Lutherans could address these critiques in a fairly effective way. I like to say Lutherans keep their truth claims to a minimum. I like to think that Lutherans are not too focused on the rules. We're certainly probably not focused enough on spirituality. I want to point out that when we say religious leaders want money and power, that the Lutheran Church began in a critique of the whole idea of wanting money and power, and that Lutherans, in terms of being anti-science, take the Bible seriously, but they're not compelled to take it literally. And when it comes to people being hypocritical, judgmental, and insincere, we have a whole doctrine about that. That's just true of all human beings. And so we should expect that among ourselves. When I talk to millennials, and when others talk to millennials about about the fact that I believe Lutherans can deal effectively with these criticisms, they often say, well then what congregation can I go to that would reflect dealing effectively with these critiques. And that's where I have a larger struggle, because it's not evident when you walk in the door that we've dealt with any of these critiques. And we'd have to be much more explicit to make that argument. And there is no evidence that if you were effective at it, millennials would show up. A less common scenario is what I call the Wilcox scenario, which is an article that was published by Branford Wilcox in 2016. His argument is that not only have mainline churches alienated or have no place, have created a space that's not convenient or compelling to millennials, they've also created an environment that is difficult for the working class in American society. When he talks about the working class in American society, he talks about high school graduates with some college but without college degrees, where he believes that the idea of self-worth is derived from one's hard work. Say that for me. Most authentic if it's done with one's hands, which enables one to be a steady, reliable provider for one's family. And the new economy, with the increase in automation in workplaces, have actually undermined the means of achieving this sense of self-worth among working class people. And increasingly, mainline churches have allied themselves with those folks who are well-educated, to use Marx's term, more likely to be in control of the means of production, more likely to be trying to maximize profits, and who as a result have undermined the basic nature of work that provides self-worth for people. And finally, certainly the mainline churches, according to Wilcox, have aligned themselves with the underprivileged and with immigrants, which in the perceptions of many in the working class have undermined the basic economic wage labor structure of American society. So Lutherans have effectively alienated not only the millennials, but also the working class, all of which we saw to some extent in the last election. So on that happy note, I'm done.